Monday. Hello. Let's go through comments a bit from the weekend. We did some good commenting at the weekend. And let's start with Sned's definition of wealth, which to my mind is perfectly fine. It is anything that is needed or desired. As simple as that. Wealth is anything that is needed or desired. It could be a nice new iPod in a plastic wrapping, all nice and new, or it could be some starlet's breasts, or any other thing that is needed or desired. That is wealth. It's kind of irrelevant whether that need or desire is concretized in some contractual arrangement, as in if it's bought or not, with either money or some other contractual agreement. That kind of is irrelevant to the actual definition, because you can have things that are needed and desired and aren't contracted for. The wealth isn't in the contracting for, it is in that temporary, because everything is temporary, either desire or need from the external world. Yeah, okay. Then Sned and I went on to a bit of, it could be called Marxist theory of labour value or something like that. But we just went through it because I think it's going to come up more in the future. That what we do when we go to work, if we're not an entrepreneur owner or the big owner, or just working self-employed, we basically sell our labour to our employers. And what we do there is, it is a contract, and what we do, we sell the fruits of our labour to the employer for a set amount, a regular wage. And then that passes, the fruits of our labour passes to the owner. The owner buys the fruits of our labour with a regular wage. That is just the normal way it's done. So, because we were moving on through factory wealth creation, that's what started it off. And we have things like, we had the list of factories and whether they created wealth or not. It was a biscuit factory, a shoe factory, a computer factory, and a tractor factory. And basically what you have is the inputs to those factories, be it flour or iron ore, and the outputs of the factories are more desirable products. A computer is more desirable than iron ore and flour, because that's obviously how you make a computer. You just mix flour and iron ore and you get a computer. But that's what's happened. The fruits of our labour to make the computer have been bought by the employer for a fixed wage, and what we do in working in a factory is to create more wealth by mixing products that are on their own would add up to less wealth than the products when we've put them together. Basically the flour and the iron ore, we mix them together, make a computer, and the computer is much more desired than the flour and the iron ore before it went through our hands. And the owner of the factory can get the difference, the wealth difference that we have created with the fruits of our labour, and that is the contract of working for somebody. So this is kind of halfway mark in the video, because this is the only chart that I've got up. US companies, percentage output going to profits, that is the difference between the input and the output of the factory, the fruit of the labour, as it were, looked at in a not strictly Marxist point of view, but in a Marxist sort of slant. That's the profits, the difference between, you know what profits are, and the amount that goes actually to the employees, contractually given as wages, salary to employees. So what we've got is profits in blue, and the amount given to what's called labour share to the employees in red. And it goes back to the Great Depression, and you can see during great turmoils like the Great Depression and the Great Recession, things get a bit out of kilter because profits for a while go completely down. So it looks like market share to the share to labour goes up, but it's just that labour share stays constant when profits take a temporary dip. Looking at this, the halfway mark of the chart is around 1971, where its labour share is quite a bit more than the profit share in comparison to the rest of the chart. But that comes to an end in about 1975, and from 1975 to the present day we can say that the labour share has trended down and the profit margin share has trended up, and they kind of go, when one goes up the other one goes down. Basically you get more profits by giving the labour less, and that's what's happened basically since 1975. We can call it 1972 if we want to call it 40 years. That is the general trend. It started in 72 and went to, we can say, the dot-com crash, where it was trending down slowly. Just towards the end of the dot-com crash, labour share was going up because everything was going gangbusters and labour could demand more in their contracts for the fruits of their labour, as it were. But since the dot-com crash, obviously, the labour share has been plummeting greatly and profit margin share has been going up greatly. Right. That's obviously important. Important for another part of our comments, which was on the posting that I did that some buggers got to pay for basically the social, what we'll just call social security. I know it's different in the United States to other places, but because I don't like the word entitlements, but I'm looking for a shorthand thing. Payouts from the government for, see, it's not easy. So I'll use social security as the coverall expression for those sort of payments. In the United States, it might be Medicare, Medicaid, it might be food stamps, and the equivalent for all OECD countries around the world. And I'm calling that social security because that's what it's called in many other OECD countries. It just is called social security because it is security for the society. That is what it is. So social security basically has to be paid for, and the big question is who is going to pay for it. As we have the labour share going down and down and the profits going up and up, we would think that it would be only logical that if somebody has to pay for it, then the people that get the profit margins should be the ones that get to pay it, because the labour share are getting more and more incapable of paying it. The trouble being that it is basically the larger population that comprise the recipients of social security and the labour share. So what we would have is the rich owning capitalist class, the 1-2%, would be making the profits then to give them to the government to give back to the workers. It would be the government redressing that gap in the chart there. It probably would be easier if the owners, capitalist rich class actually just gave the labour share directly to the workers. But obviously that is a tragedy of the commons, where they are all have to do it or none of them do it, because if one or two do it, then they will be wiped out by the other masses that don't do it, because they would become less profitable. They'd just become less profitable, basically. So the movement, the trend, is to pay labour less, and the only way that can be arrested, stopped, is by some sort of government diktat saying that this must stop. Otherwise, it's totally illogical for the companies, corporations, businesses to do it on their own. Right, where are we going with this? Let's just put that aside, because do I want to finish with Paul and I and the... Yeah, basically, the last thing and the last line of commenting from yesterday went, this fiscal cliff, etc., and austerity in Europe and the UK and around the place is basically that the government is finding it now itself incapable of paying this social security. It does not have the money to pay the social security that it has promised to pay. So it has to find that money from somewhere. And the big question is, where can it find it from? And that's what's happening at the moment. The big political discussions and money discussions and fiscal discussions are all about trying to put things in place whereby the government continues to be able to pay their social security commitments. But we must ask ourselves, why are all the OECD governments currently running short of money so as to be able to pay the social security commitments that they've made? Why is it? What has been going wrong that has made it that they just don't seem to be able to pay it anymore? And they are either having to raise more on the tax side or cut down on the amount of social security they pay out. What has happened to make that situation prevalent across the OECD? And finally, where we got to was that we left the why aside, because we've dealt with that so many times, and went to, well, what will they have to do? Will they increase the austerity, as in upping taxes and downing outgoing payments? Or are they going to come to that law that they passed where they can only spend the amounts of monies that they bring in taxes or borrow by selling bonds? Where we got to was, we think that they probably will have to change the law again so they can spend money without it being either tax money or bonds money. Because it just seems that to keep your society together, it's more important to break the law and spend hypothetical money than it is to see your society break down. Now, if they can raise taxes on wherever they can raise taxes on, and or bring down their external commitments, and society doesn't break down, obviously that's the way it'll continue. And it'll all be dealt with in taxes and selling bonds. But if that's not possible, they would have to make the law so they can spend money that isn't tax money or bond money. The trouble with that is that it makes everybody look very seriously at what you are actually doing, and they will ask very searching questions of you of exactly what you are doing. They kind of do that now, you would think, but I don't think it would be anything in comparison to how it would be if the law was changed and they started spending what we termed in the comment section funny money. And if one country seemed to be getting away with doing the funny money thing, you can bet your bottom funny money or real money, dollar, buck, or whatever it might be, that other countries would follow. And the main drive of what I was trying to say is the countries that are struggling now with spending outgoings with tax money and bond money are doing these things, but they don't really know what they're doing. The main thing is in Japan now that they're getting the central bank more involved, and they're going to try and muddle through this. Muddle throughing is what governments have always done right up to now. But as this becomes more critical, I think it's going to become more critical that the governments actually know what they're doing and why they're doing it, as opposed to just muddling through. And especially if they ever get this monetary and fiscal thing confused, mixed more up, which it looks like they're doing, that's financial. Fiscal, which is government, and monetary, which is central bank. If they're going to mix those up, I really think that they have to know what they're doing. And I'm pretty convinced they don't know what they're doing now. But if they move to more spending of funny money, I think they are going to... It's just that the questions that they're going to be asked are going to be so much more searching. And the government ministers are going to have to come out on radio and television and tell the people exactly what they're doing. And I think they're really going to struggle to do that. They're struggling now with justifying the hundreds of years old method of doing things, which is spending out with money from taxes and bonds. But if they start using funny money as well, the questions are going to be multiple times more difficult to answer. Anyway, that's it for Monday. I went on a bit more than I expected to. That was comments at the weekend. It was quite good. Thanks, boys and girls. Bye.